Dim identity. The Mental and Spiritual Disease of Low Identification by Stephen Stone. Have you noticed that everything is gay now? We are suddenly bombarded with an onslaught of pride, which quickly morphed from a movement that strove to establish the rights of people who wanted to openly partake in same-sex coupling to something much more. Now that same-sex couples can get married and have children while being protected by law from discrimination, it would follow that the battle has been won, that there is no longer a need for an insurgent force pushing toward a goal, but rather a small occupying force to make sure gains are kept. But it hasn't worked out quite that way, has it? No, the movement has evolved. Now armies of people need to base their entire identities on the movement. The tent is much bigger, and its insatiable hunger for some level of vague acceptance cannot be satiated. My aim is to quantify one of the many side effects of this unending revolution that has managed to ensnare most of the world's largest brand-conscious corporations and governments, just as its current campaign has become objectively unhinged and dangerous. The current concept of identity itself is rather modern. To need to identify as something or with a cause is not all that new, I suppose. But the way in which many people feel they need to go about it is quite strange. If you were to go back to a random historical year, let's say 1850, and ask 10 average people in Atlanta, Georgia what they identify as, they would probably be confused. If you could manage to make them understand what you mean when you say something like that in the year 2023, they would likely answer broadly, something along the lines of their country, ancestry, or faith. But if you went to anywhere in the United States and asked someone the same question, today, the answers would likely be wide-ranging. Everything from gender-fluid woman of color to Christian father and plumber. The atomization of society has led to a more specific sense of identity. This is probably bad in general, but that is not my focus here. My focus is the obsession with dim things, like sexual preference, as leading identities. I accept that modern Westerners think more granularly about their identity and ask why so many of them are choosing to identify with such empty things. For the purpose of this point, I will use the amalgamation of sex-gender preference people that are commonly known as LGBT, though it is tempting to use the latest absurd and ever-growing acronym LGBTQIA2S+. I believe my thinking here could be applied similarly to the equally growing race-based blocs, especially since these two groups increasingly find themselves in coalition against an enemy that is, apparently, heterosexual white people that don't fall over themselves to pledge fealty to their deranged new religion. My church, and I assume most churches, are now having to deal with the pressure of this new religion of LGBT, wanting to intermix with Christianity. What does a church do when a member decides that they want to be openly gay or pretend to change their gender? What is the line? Do they allow them to attend services but not serve? What if this person wants to wear a pride shirt to church? What if a gay couple wants to hold hands? It's not as simple as just refusing to perform a marriage ceremony. There are many degrees of expression to this identity. While discussing these very questions with my friend, who is also the pastor of my church, it occurred to me that we are reacting to this new phenomenon in a logistical way, but I hadn't thought further back into the process. Maybe, instead of treating this malady as a terminal case, but dancing around accommodations for the afflicted, we should ask why they feel the need to express their affliction in this way. Why are these people needing to be identified and accepted as this new thing? There are doubtless thousands of ridiculous social science papers claiming that happiness can only be achieved if these people are accepted and affirmed. This, again, is not what I'm after. This entire debacle teases out a core problem that an increasing number of people are saddled with. They are essentially forced to identify with something, and the old fallbacks of God, country, and family are out of style. In this desperate search for an identification, the cultural power of the LGBT blob stands ready with its corporate branding, carnival barkers, and New Age priests. But at the core of this identification stands a pathetic truth. When a person chooses to make this the core of their identity, they are saying, "The way I most like to achieve orgasm is what I am all about." Let's use the example of a gay man. When this man says, first and foremost, his homosexuality is what he is, he proclaims that his preference to achieve orgasm with the help of another man is the core of his being. How empty and lacking. This dim version of an identity isn't even a drop in the bucket of one's thirsting soul. So, when a person enters a church and demands that church accept and/or affirm them as gay or trans, the conversation should go no further. Not that this person should be turned away or shunned. Quite the opposite. This person is not just spiritually sick, their soul is on death's door. Not in the basic sense that they are committing a sin. No, it's almost worse than that. They are convinced that their sexual desires are the most important thing about them. Their preferred method of orgasm comes way before the Spirit of God. They are trying to get to God across this vast sea of worldliness, and they don't even have a boat. They're trying to swim across an ocean, and they're still on land. This identity crisis is being remedied by the world, and the church is failing to pick up the pieces. The playbook is either outdated or never existed in the first place. I contend that the move is not to dance around this issue and hope that your trans member doesn't keep pushing the line until you have to do something controversial. The move is to ask them tough questions. Why are you coming to church would be a good place to start. Let's assume the answer to this question is to worship God or get closer to Jesus. Then the very next line of questioning should mercilessly seek to get to the root of why this person feels the need to so heavily identify themselves with their sexual desires. I myself have committed many sins. I spent a good deal of my life as an active alcoholic. That is a part of me, and one piece of my identity. I am a recovering alcoholic, but it is not the core of my identity. If you made me give an answer to what my identity is, my sins, preferences, sexual desires, hobbies, titles, and all other things that make me what I am, would not come to mind. I would say that I am a Christian. I try and often fail to serve God. That is my purpose, at core, and identity. I suspect that if these people were honest, they would not be able to say that. God is acting as a secondary, at best, force in their life. Their base sin is not that of immoral sexual acts, but that of putting God behind themselves. Homosexuality is a sin, sure. We seem to say it's a particularly bad sin, and I'm not sure why it's any worse than adultery or a myriad of other transgressions. But adulterers do not generally broadcast their need to have sex outside of their marriages, much less show pride in it. Liars do not boast of their great lies. Thieves do not, generally, have pride in not identifying thieving as the core of their being. No, this particular thing is special. It is special because this pride movement is not really a movement at all. It is a religion that most of its adherents don't know they're partaking in. The first commandment of this religion is that sex is everything. Life should be ordered around sex. The way in which you like to have sex is very important. In fact, it is so important that without it, you will not be happy. The belief, apparently, is now that if you don't have sex in the exact way you like, and have it be accepted and affirmed by everyone, then you cannot be happy. Of course, there will always be those evil people who don't approve of the way you like to have sex, and those people are seen as the enemy. There is one thing I do know and one thing I do not. The thing I know is that, as people continually march toward needing an identity, they are less and less so finding Christ. They are more and more so finding the insane LGBT world, and they're paying the price. What I don't know is how we change that. That is a question that our spiritual leaders need to answer, and quickly. I've seen some say that somehow less people attending church is a good thing because only the true believers are there. I guess that's fine, but it smells to me like an overdose of cope. All those people that aren't feeling cultural pressure to attend church are feeling cultural pressure to do something else. Alarmingly so, that pressure is resulting in people falling, head first, into the clutches of sexually based identity.